1. The Midnight Visitor. Sarah had moved into the quaint little house on the outskirts of town, eager for a fresh start. But from the first night, she felt an unsettling presence. Every night at midnight, she heard footsteps approaching her bedroom door. One night, she mustered the courage to peek through the keyhole. On the other side, she saw a dark, shadowy figure staring back at her with glowing red eyes. Panicking, she locked the door and hid under her bed. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and silence filled the room. The next morning, she found a note on her nightstand that read, "I see you too." She lived alone, but the handwriting was her own. 2. The Forgotten Child. Every night, Lily heard the faint cries of a child coming from the attic of her new home. Despite her fears, she decided to investigate. As she climbed the creaky stairs, the cries grew louder, more desperate. She found an old trunk covered in dust and cobwebs. Opening it, she discovered a diary belonging to a child named Emily, who had gone missing years ago. The last entry read, "They locked me in the trunk, but I will find a way out." As Lily closed the diary, the attic door slammed shut. She turned around and saw the trunk was now empty, and the cries were coming from inside her own mind. 3. The Phantom Reflection. John had always been fascinated by the antique mirror he found at a flea market. It was said to be haunted, but he dismissed the rumors as superstitions. One evening, while staring at his reflection, he noticed something odd. His reflection was smiling, but he wasn't. Terrified, he stepped back, but the reflection remained. Suddenly, it reached through the mirror and grabbed him, pulling him into the glass. Now trapped inside, he watched in horror as his doppelganger stepped out and began living his life. The last thing he saw before darkness consumed him was his reflection waving goodbye. 4. The Vanishing Roommate. Mark's roommate, Dave, had been acting strangely for weeks, muttering about unseen creatures and shadows that followed him. One morning, Mark woke up to find Dave gone, leaving behind only a hastily scrawled note. "They're here. Don't trust the light." That night, as Mark sat alone in the dimly lit apartment, the power suddenly went out. Grabbing a flashlight, he stumbled through the darkness, searching for any sign of Dave. In the kitchen, he found a figure standing in the corner. Relieved, he called out, "Dave!" The figure turned, revealing empty eye sockets and a wide, unnatural grin. "Dave's gone. You're next," it whispered before everything went black. 5. The Perfect Photograph. Emma was an aspiring photographer who found an old camera at a garage sale. The seller warned her that the camera was cursed, but she bought it anyway, thinking it was just a story to add intrigue. She started taking pictures around town, capturing beautiful scenes and candid moments. However, when she developed the photos, she noticed a shadowy figure in the background of each one, growing closer with every shot. One night, she decided to take a selfie. As the flash went off, she felt a cold breath on her neck. In the developed photo, the shadowy figure stood right behind her, grinning menacingly. When she turned around, she was alone, but her reflection in the window showed the figure standing next to her. 6. The Last Bus. Late at night, I boarded the last bus home, settling into a seat near the back. The bus was nearly empty, save for an elderly woman sitting a few rows ahead. As the bus drove through the dark streets, I noticed the woman kept turning to look at me, her eyes wide and fearful. I tried to ignore her, but the unease grew with every glance. Finally, she moved to sit beside me, whispering urgently, "You have to get off at the next stop." Confused and a little scared, I nodded. When the bus stopped, I stood to exit, but the driver blocked my path, his face twisted in a menacing grin. "This ride isn't over," he growled. I turned to the woman for help, but she was gone, leaving only a chilling message scratched into the seat. "Never leave the bus." 7. Turbulent flight. Flying back home from a business trip, I was relieved to find my seat next to a friendly man who seemed eager to chat. As we talked, he mentioned he was visiting family he hadn't seen in years. The flight was smooth until we hit sudden turbulence, the plane shaking violently. Oxygen masks dropped, and panic spread among the passengers. As we steadied, I turned to my seatmate to see how he was doing, but he was gone, leaving his seatbelt fastened and no sign of struggle. Baffled, I looked around but saw no trace of him. A flight attendant approached, asking if everything was all right. I explained the situation, and her face turned pale. "Sir," she said quietly, "that seat has been empty for the entire flight." 8. The Uber ride. Taking an Uber late at night, I felt uneasy as the driver took a different route than usual. I watched the unfamiliar streets pass by, my anxiety growing. "Are you sure this is the right way?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The driver just nodded, eyes fixed on the road. Suddenly, he stopped in a desolate area and turned to me with a chilling smile. "We're here," he said, his voice eerily calm. Before I could react, he locked the doors. I fumbled for my phone, but it was dead. Just as panic set in, the door unlocked on its own, and a voice from the back seat whispered, "Run." I turned to see an empty seat. The only evidence of my escape, a single word scratched into the window: escape. 9. The shortcut. Walking home from work, I decided to take a shortcut through an alley I usually avoided. Halfway through, I noticed a man following me, his footsteps echoing ominously. Quickened my pace, but so did he. Panic set in and I broke into a run, the man still on my heels. Desperate, I ducked into a nearby building and hid in a storage room. I heard the door creak open, his footsteps getting closer. Holding my breath, I waited for him to leave. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the room was silent. Cautiously, I stepped out, only to see a note pinned to the door: "I know where you live." 10. The morning train. I always found comfort in taking the same morning train to work, seeing the familiar faces of regular commuters. One day, a stranger boarded and sat directly across from me, his intense gaze never leaving mine. Unnerved, I buried my face in my book, but I could still feel his eyes on me. As the train approached my stop, the stranger stood up and whispered, "You shouldn't have ignored me." Startled, I looked up, but he had already disappeared into the crowd. Shaking off the encounter, I stepped off the train and headed to work. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I found a photograph on my pillow of me reading on the train, with the stranger's shadow looming over me. Thank you for watching. For more short stories under 10 minutes, click on the video on your screen, or if you want longer stories based on real-life events or fictionals, click on the playlist appearing on your screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales. See you in the next video.